In 2021, Yamaha announced the R7, which everyone assumed would be the successor to their legendary R6. After years of 600 sales declining and manufacturers struggling to up their power output due to increasing emission laws, bringing out a 750 inline-4 that revs to the moon seemed like the logical next step. But that is not at all what the R7 was. I know I've missed the R7 trend by a couple of years, but I figured my disappointment would slowly fade with time. However, even to this day, I'm still mad. Despite currently sitting next to an Aprilia, I'm actually a Yamaha fanboy through and through. So you would assume that I would love anything that Yamaha put out, because that is usually the case. No matter the type of motorcycle, from adventure bike, superbike, all the way to motocross bikes, I usually find myself gravitating towards Yamahas. I just think that they do it the best and often look the best. Over the years, I found myself with an R6, an R1, 3 MT-09s, a YZ250 2-stroke and 4-stroke, and most importantly, a Pee-wee 80. But the R7 is a big mistake, at least in my opinion. Unfortunately, that does seem to be the direction that we're heading in. Between the CBR 650R, the Ninja 650, the Aprilia RS 660, and now the R7, that seems to be the way we're going. Nobody wants to buy 600s anymore, and manufacturers are struggling to even maintain their current power output because these strict emission laws just keep getting worse. As far as I know, you can only buy an R6 these days if you use it on a track. They're not even road legal. And even that could have changed by now because all of these laws change so quickly. At least Yamaha and Aprilia tried to do something creative in this segment, unlike the others. To be fair, I don't have a problem with the motorcycle itself. I actually really like the bike they're trying to create, the segment they're trying to fill. There definitely needs to be a bike to bridge the gap between the R3 and the R1 now that the R6 is gone, both power-wise and price-wise. But the issue that I have with it is that they should never have called it the R7. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out Yamaha's naming system when it comes to the R series. I mean, assuming you know even a little bit about motorcycles and displacement, you can quickly grasp the fact that an R3 is faster than an R125, for example, or that an R6 is faster than an R3, and the R1 gets a little tricky because 1 is smaller than 3, but assuming you have any motorcycle knowledge, you can pick up that an R1 is the fastest in the line. But that's where the R7 throws this all off. I mean, in terms of displacement, the R7 is technically bigger than the R6 at 689 cc's as opposed to the 599 of the R6. But when it comes to power or even cylinders, it's a completely different story. The R6 is famous for revving to the moon to make its horsepower, and all of that effort amounts to 116 horsepower, which is really impressive for such a little engine. So you'd assume that the parallel twin on the R7 is pretty close, but you'd be wrong. It's just 72 horsepower. And I know you'll probably come at me about the torque figures, which I don't really care about, because if it's an R series, it should be all about performance, outright horsepower and track speed in my opinion. If you want torque, buy an MT. That's literally what it stands for, Masters of Torque. But that's okay, I ride an MT every day. I understand the joys of torque over horsepower, and it'll make that torque in a much more achievable part of the rev range. But that doesn't change the fact that this isn't an R7. This is an R7. Back in 1999, World Superbikes were racing 750s, specifically 750s that the public could buy. The rule stated that a manufacturer had to sell at least 500 units of that model to the public to be able to race that bike in World Superbikes. So Yamaha launched the R7. It was basically a full-on race bike with Öhlins suspension, titanium valves and conrods, and only sold 500. Just enough to homologate the R7 to race. And ever since, this is what the R7 has been to motorcycle enthusiasts around the world. Not this. I have to be honest, I haven't gotten the chance to ride the new R7 yet, mostly because I'm still mad at it. So my opinions on it are pretty useless. The closest I've come is riding an MT-07, which was also disappointing, but mostly just because I got off an R1 to ride that. and most things are disappointing after riding an R1. But I do absolutely love that CP2 engine. I often find myself watching YouTube videos about it just to hear it. I'd love one. They sound a lot bigger than they really are. The other day, a friend of mine asked me if I'd seen the new R7, and I explained how I had, but it's slower than an R6, so I'm still mad at it. And he was surprised. He hadn't stopped to do any research, but by the naming system, he just assumed it was the successor. It was faster and better than the R6. And that is exactly my problem with it. So this is my petition to change the name of the R7. Of course, that'll never happen because Yamaha don't watch these videos, and even if they did, they wouldn't care because they have their reasons for calling it the R7. They have their R series. To be honest, I think it should have been called the MT-07R or something along those lines. I have no doubt that naming these bikes is difficult. You can't replace an icon like the R7, you shouldn't be putting it above the R6, which you did, but it is kind of in the R series. You've already committed to putting the R3 and everything below that in the R series, so this is just an awkward one. Perhaps you should have taken a note from Aprilia and called it something like the R690. You still have the R, but you're not lying. For some reason, the Aprilia RS660 doesn't frustrate me as much as the R7, even though they're in the same category. Somewhat because this makes 100 horsepower, which is much more reasonable, but mostly because it doesn't feel like they disrupted the Aprilia naming system. We have our RSV4, which is the top of the line, and an RS660 is still faster than an RS250 or an RS125. It's not confusing. Of course, Yamaha want to use the R in it because that helps them sell bikes. It's the same reason that it's styled the same way as an R1, an R6 or an R3. If they look the same, they sound the same, more people want them. Exactly like my friend who didn't realize it was slower than an R6, people will end up walking into dealerships with little knowledge and being sold on that idea. I think a part of me is upset because an R6 was always my dream bike growing up. And eventually, I did get to the point where I had one, and it was everything I'd ever dreamed it would be. So having an R7 above that just isn't the same.
You might have also heard the rumors of Yamaha bringing out the R9, which would have the inline 3-cylinder engine from the MT-09. This could be the real R6 replacement, because even my older MT-09 makes the same power as an R6, but it would have the torque advantage at 87 Nm over just 67, and could also be narrower with one cylinder less. Sadly, it wouldn't rev to the moon, but it would sound distinctive with the beloved CP3 engine that's also found in the XSR 900, Tracer 900, and everyone's favorite three-wheeled monster, the Nikon.
But anyway, I feel better now that I could get that off my chest. Let me know if you agree or if you think that we should just rewrite history, get rid of that old R7 and make this the only one. Put all of your renaming suggestions down in the comments because I have no doubt that Yamaha will be here soon and they'll take tips. Share this video with a friend who had the original R7. No wait, that'll only get me 500 views. I'll see you on the next ride.